In Algebra 1, Section 5.2, we're dealing with substitution. So in this case, we're still doing the same thing we wanted to do last section, except last section was all about graphing. And sometimes the two equations, when you're trying to graph them to see where they overlap, they get a little complicated, especially if like the b is not a whole number and you have a fraction or decimal. So the next two sections is going to teach you a non-graphing method of how to solve it. Substitution there's an exception with substitution. The next section, elimination, you can use it for any equation. It's kind of like the quadratic equation for solving everything. If you don't know what that means, you will in Algebra 2. But this might be a simple one because elimination is pretty long. Substitution, if you can pick up a key requirement, then you should be able to solve it no problem. And it's not that you can't solve it for all equations, it's that if you don't have this one key requirement, then the equation gets even more complicated. So the one key requirement is that you have to have a variable with no coefficient, or just a coefficient of 1. So the requirement is you need a variable with a coefficient of 1. Okay? So that means there has to be a variable without a number in front of it. Because when you want to substitute, you don't want to divide, you just want to isolate everything on one side. And you'll see what I mean. We're going to go to the first one and then we're going to go through the steps. Because if I read the steps right now, you're not really going to understand. So let's go to number 1. And we'll go through the steps together. So number 1 tells us to solve y equals x plus 1 and 4x plus y equals 6. Now, if I look, I have three variables that I can choose from: y, x, and y. Okay? This has a 4 in front of it, so this does not meet my requirements. Okay? So I can do either one of these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate it. But fortunately, y is already isolated. It's by itself. So I've already got step 1 down. Isolate a new variable, check. Isolate one variable, check. We've isolated y. Now, for example, if I chose 4x, the reason why it would make it difficult is I would subtract y from both sides, and then I divide 4, and then I end up having decimals, because 6 over 4 is a decimal, and 1 over 4 is a decimal or fraction. I'm not going to have whole numbers, so it makes the situation even more complicated. If none of them have a 1 in front of it, you're going to use the next section, which is elimination. So y equals x plus 1. This is already isolated, lucky us. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to substitute into second equation. And I should this leaves me with one variable. Not now, but once I do it. And let me show you what I mean. I'm going to take the isolated, so that means y is equal to this entire equation, x plus 1. So I'm going to bubble this equation. Okay, I'm going to put it in parentheses. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute, hence substitution. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bubble and I'm going to replace it for y. I'm not going to put it next to it. I'm not going to add it to it or anything like that. Because y is the same value as this entire side, I'm going to replace it. And I'll show you why that's helpful. Okay? The reason why this is then helpful is if you look closely, 4x plus x plus 1 equals 6. Now, I couldn't solve this equation or this equation because they have an x and a y. And I can only solve equations with a maximum of one missing variable. By doing this, I only have a what left? An x. So, since I'm not multiplying, I'm combining like terms. 4x and x is 5x plus 1 equals 6. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. I end up with 5x equals 5. Then divide 5 by both sides. I end up with x equals 1. Now, I found x. So that means in my equation, this point where both of these, if I graph them, will intersect, I know that it's 1, my x, but I still need to find my y. Well, again, I can only solve with one missing variable, but now I have one of the variables to plug in. So now, we did solve for variables, so number 2, this is what it means, but you should have only one variable. I apologize, I read all of this, but I didn't even bring you through it. Then we solve for our variable, which is this, x. equals 1. Now we're going to substitute the found variable, this is our found variable, to an original equation. So it doesn't matter which one, I can do it back into here because it's supposed to be an answer for both of them. But I'm going to choose the top one because the top one is easier. So, just so you know, this is next, I apologize. I'm going to do y equals x is 1 now, plus 1. And I end up with y equals 2. So substitute the found variables to the original, done. And then I use 3 and 4 to put x and y format. And so that means x is 1 and my y is 2. So, just to recap, 1, 2, that point 1, 2, is lies in both of these. And again, if I'm not sure, I can plug them in to check. I don't have enough board space to do that. But on your test, you should always check your answers to make sure that you're getting it right. So my x is 1 and my y is 2. I don't have to find it in order. I just have to make sure that at the end I write it as a point. This is to make sure you understand that they're not just random numbers. This gives me the point at which these two lines, if I were to graph, would intersect. The next one is not so simple because we don't have a variable already isolated, but what are my choices? I actually only have one choice. Everything else has a constant in front of it, a coefficient, except my y. Everything except my y has a coefficient in it. So this is the only thing this is the only one I can solve. And the one I need to get rid of is positive 6x. So the opposite would be negative 6x. And I'm not trying to make it into a y equals mx plus b format or anything like that. So it doesn't matter which way I do it. So I just do 1 minus 6x. Okay, now that's done. I isolated one variable. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to bubble it and I'm going to plug it in for my y. See that? Because y equals that whole thing, I'm going to plug it in for my y. So I had 3x plus 2. Again, I'm replacing the y. I'm not putting it next to it. I'm not dividing it. Sometimes people come up with random things to do with that y. I switch it out, okay? So I switch out this y for the entire bubble. 1 minus 6x equals negative 5. Okay? So when I only have one variable, an x. So now I can solve. I'll do 3x. I have to take this 2 and distribute it. So 2 times positive 1 is positive 2. 2 times negative 6x is a minus 12x equals negative 5. Now I'm going to combine like terms. 3x minus 12x, which would give me negative 9x, and then plus 2 equals negative 5. Subtract 2 on both sides. I end up with subtract 2 on both sides. This is negative 7 negative 9x equals negative 7. Divide by negative 9, divide by negative 9. I end up with, the negatives cancel out, 7 over 9, which is unfortunate. I hate fractions, which is fine. I can do it. I can do fractions. All right? So now my next step is once I solve for that variable, I'm going to substitute it to an original equation. Don't substitute to one of these into an original equation. Let's use this one because it's easier, especially since we've got that fraction. And remember, this replaces an x, not y. So y stays the same, and it equals 6 times 7, 9 equals, plus y plus 6 times 7, 9 equals 1. This is y plus 42 over 9. And this will be 9. I want this 1 into common terms. So I'm going to subtract 42 over 9, subtract 42 over 9. I end up with y equals 33. 33 over 9. And I don't think Yep, that's a decimal. Just checking. I should know that. But it does both go into 3, so it's 11 over 3. Wow, that's a really mean one, but that's the answer. Let me check the equation. Let me check it real quick. -6. Plug it in. -12. Yeah. Okay. So that means my x is 7, 9, and my y is 11 over 3. This is my answer. Go ahead and write that down. I'm pretty sure the book's going to give you ones that are not all fractions, but there you go. But can you imagine if you had to graph this? That would be a really hard point to find. That's why something like substitution and the next section elimination would be better. So page 340, numbers 5, 340, number 5, and I will see you in class.